is Sam Pace.
And when did you first come to Creston?
Well, I first started living here in '94. I'd been coming here for a good 5 years before that.
Coming to Creston proper for a few
Well,
years
yeah,
before that?
I was living down in Mineral Hot Springs Estates in a little cabin I built. I built that in probably '87, somewhere there. So I've been coming up here quite a lot. You know, I spent a lot of time at the Valley View Hot Springs.
And you came into town proper, was that on accident or on purpose that you ended up in town instead of out in the Baca?
No, I had a good friend named Sally Slobin, who was only, I think, about 33 or so, and but she had cancer, and it was fairly obvious to most people that she was dying. She was kind of trying to hold on to hope and stuff. But anyway, I mean, if you want to hear the whole story, I mean, it was like I was driving up to Valley View one afternoon, and a guy named Lucas Price, who lived here for a little while, came by my cabin right after I had left, and he had lived here for a while in the early middle '90s, and anyway, he'd come by to pick up some stuff because we would sell food together at Grateful Dead shows and other kind of things, you know. And anyway, I was driving up to Valley View, and this big eagle just flew right in front of my windshield, headed towards Creston. And in those days, I would assume that when birds did something like that, it was like they were trying to communicate with me, some special message or something, you know. So I realized, well, I must need to go over to Creston for some reason, but I wasn't going to go over there right then. I was on my way up to the hot springs. But when I got up there, I called back to my cabin because I had a phone there. And Lucas was there, and he said, "You need to go over and see Sally Ann." And at this point, I was also renting a place up in Denver and taking some classes at a massage school up there. And so anyway, I made sure that I went over and visited Sally. I think it was either later that afternoon or the next day. And she was pretty sick, and she wanted me to come and stay with her. She needed someone to kind of take care of her a little bit and stuff. And so I told her, well, I was moving out, and I had to go back up to Denver to get some more stuff, but in another week or so I could do that. And so we set that up. And you know, mostly I had already decided to go up and get a lot in the Baca and build on it. I'd found one up there for a few $1,000s that was next to a creek. In the '90s, there were a lot of those lots available, you know. And of course, back then, the guys at the POA, you know, shop down there were really helpful. I forget the guy's name. He was there for years. Sean worked for him before he took over. And he, anyway, he came out and helped me find the stakes and said, yeah, we can bring the water line right up to your property and all this stuff.
The guys at the shop did that?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, they were real helpful. Everybody really seemed to work together better back then, you know. The water and sand department, Scott Johnson was running it. It was a lot smaller community in those days. And
was there a ENAC committee back then?
yeah, but they didn't do much. They hadn't tried flexing their muscles, and you know, I think they do a lot more than they actually have, you know, legal powers to do. That's my opinion. You know, they passed a lot of what I consider draconian measures in recent years. So, you know, but anyway, Sally had this property in town, and she didn't have any money. You know, I think I had about $5,000, you know, saved up. And so, but I knew I needed to get a piece of property and build something. You know, I built a number of log cabins. I was in the wood business. I went out in the woods and collected logs and took them to the mill and made my own lumber and have the logs three-sided so I could build with them easily and stuff. But she talked me into giving her a few $1,000s to buy her property. I told her, well, I could buy this, but I'm not going to pay any more for it than I'm going to pay for the other place.
Look, Jim's making cookies over there.
Yeah.
Sounds like somebody's in the.
Oh, you got it? Yeah, got the first one. We're rolling. He was trying to open the window.
Oh.
He's got the wood stove going in there, he's making cookies.
Oh, yeah.
It's about 110 degrees over there.
Yeah, I bet.
So you were...
And so that's how I got into the town, and it was nice for Sally Ann. She had money. She could buy things and go places and do stuff those last, you know, couple of months of her life. And this must have been in maybe March or something like that, I'm thinking. And when I started doing this, and so. You know, I just went ahead and started bringing some of my materials up and started finishing off the house. She didn't think anybody could do it because it, you know, her boyfriend, she'd actually married Art Troll, had, you know, started it, and he'd put this weird structure on top of some cinder blocks that she'd bought.
Yeah,
Stuff.
I've seen that.
Yeah. So but then after I'd worked on it about a month, and I was pretty much staying with her most of the time after that. And if she felt, you know, well enough, we'd get in the car and drive over to Salida or Del Norte or go somewhere, have lunch, do some things, get her out and stuff.
So, but it sounds like yours was more like almost divine or service related. You weren't seeking to be in the politics of town versus the politics of the Baca.
No, it was just, you know, what happened. You know, it was okay with me. You know, at that time the irrigation ditch still ran through town before Steve McDowell had somehow managed to get a hold of the water rights and get permission to dry up the ditch.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway.
Were there, so that was up on Hippie Hill.
Mm-hmm.
How many houses were up there?
Well, Rock had started building his. Roy was maybe already living in that first little place that he had built. When Sally had first bought the property there back in, I think it was around 1990 or something like that. Then everybody else that she worked with, which was Roy and Rock and Diego was around, and a bunch of people went up there and bought a bunch of lots. They were selling them on time at this real estate office that is where the library is now.
Do you know who named it Hippie Hill? Was it the old timers or the hippies?
I really don't know. It just, you know, it was one of those things that wasn't me. You know.
Did y'all call it Hippie Hill?
I wasn't calling it that when I first moved there. You know, I didn't really hear that name until sometime in the 2000s at least.
Okay.
I don't think. Yeah.
And do you remember when you came into town? Were there long-standing Crestone residents that you saw and interacted with and met? And
Yeah, there was. There were a few of them, and you know, one of the first things that happened. It was that first year. It was the meeting before the July 4th, so maybe it was in June. I just walked down to the, because Sally had, I believe, died in May. But I walked down to where the town hall was because they were having a meeting, and someone had told me that they had decided they weren't going to let them do their street dance on July 4th, which they always did. And so I just went down to ask about it. And they said, well, the people just set it up and do it, and they don't clean up, and they leave a mess. There's no, there's no sheriffs or anything. The liquor store becomes a bar. Everybody's just out on the street drinking beers and stuff. And that's how it was. We'd always been, for years, been coming down to Valley View Hot Springs because the guy who owned it, Neil, was really into fireworks. And he would always spend a bunch of money and do a fireworks show. And then we would leave afterwards and go over to Crestone because they'd have a band playing on the porch steps and, dance in the street for a while. It was just fun.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so, but they explained, well, that these people could have it but they have to come up with a little bit of money and have some way of handling the trash and cleaning up and stuff. Wasn't going to be a lot, but anyway, so I understood that, and then by the next year we'd started having all those things at the firehouse, and they might have still been going on there when you first moved to town.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember any old timers in particular that were there when you came in? Like Jim Homer wasn't there. Oh,
No, Jim wasn't living here then.
he was out. So Sean
Of course,
was here.
Sean was around, but he hadn't started on his property there.
Oh.
He was still living in one of the little cabins right along
the west.
Carbonate,
Uh-huh.
where the creek runs by and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and we kind of got crosswise when I was the building inspector,
Uh-huh.
But anyway, that's just.
Do you remember when you were the building inspector and I came to your house to get a permit?
A little bit, yeah.
Do you remember what you were wearing?
I don't know, but Andy and I used to walk around naked sometimes.
Yeah.
It was legal on our own property. We didn't try to expose ourselves or anything.
I got my building permit.
Yeah. Well, I've always been an advocate of no building codes and allowing people to come in and use whatever lumber they can find and old windows and all those things. I mean, that's how I managed to build where I was. I spent the last money I had immediately putting in the septic system and getting the well going.
Mm-hmm.
The guy left and finally came back a year later and finished the well, which surprised me. I thought I'd just lost that money that I'd fronted him, but he did come back and finish.
That's probably one of the biggest things that I want to ask you about, and if you can spend a minute saying, well, is it your level of community service and apolitical political involvement? So if you could spend a minute saying what you've done as far as county commissioner and all that, and then I'm really curious about your outlooks on government involvement, and as we all know, town will grow.
Uh-huh.
And what role you think town council should or shouldn't play in that, and how you would like to see town develop.
Yeah.
But please introduce your career a little bit.
Well, yeah. When I first moved here into the valley in the late '80s, I was coming over from the Telluride area. There were a number of other people that came over from the Telluride area: Jerry McAndrews, Linda and Lido, Bill Elsie, a number of people.
Luna.
Yeah, Luna and Lucas. Yeah.
Oh, that was Lucas?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He and Luna came over together, and were living in one of what is Jim's brother Tom Homer's little rentals, and so I was up here a lot through the early '90s, visiting them and stuff. And then Lucas started building his tire house over there and stuff. I used to call them earthships instead of tire houses.
Yeah.
What got me into the political realm and the realm of governance was a couple things. They did a Future Search conference the next year after I was here, I think in '95, that Kate Steichen ran. And I went to that, and it was interesting to see a number of people in the Baca that I really hadn't met or knew too well. You know, in those days, we would have dances in this room a lot. Or some guys would come down and play a little music and stuff. And we'd dance. Stuff, I remember going to one or two of those. And then they started having them out at the White Eagle Village. They used to have them there almost once a month. Everybody would go out there and dance, and you know, it was just nice. But anyway, the reason I got involved was because I could walk down to the town hall, and it was interesting to see the governance happening. In those days, the only person who was on the payroll for the town was Sandy, I forget her last name anyway, it would come to me. But she was a teacher at the school also. And she and her husband lived up here. And you know, she was a town clerk, and we paid her $100 a month, and she took the minutes at the meetings, and she gave you your building permits and stuff like that. Septic permits, things like that. I don't know. I remember having to go down to the school and meet her and get stuff to do that. So, you know, I did everything like I was supposed to. I got a plumbing permit and an electrical permit and all those things. And finished the house. But what got me on the town board was the fact that Steve had been elected, and he wasn't coming to the meetings. He was living in town then. And so after he'd already missed 3 unexcused meetings, and the second time or the third time I went down to the meeting to see what was going on, they just said, hey, if you want to be on the board, we can just appoint you. So we have a hard time getting enough people to be on the board. And so they just appointed me onto the board. You know, after that, about every time I ran for the board, I got the least number of votes of anybody. And so if there was more people, and I was appointed again after another person won an election and went to a few meetings and discovered you don't always get your way, and decided he wasn't interested in it anymore.
How many people do you think were voting?
Oh, probably at the most 40 or 50 in those days.
I think we only get 30-something now.
Exactly, yeah, it could have been less.
I bet it was.
You know, yeah.
I bet it was 18 people voting.
Yeah.
And then you moved on to the county?
Well, the Future Search Conference set up some committees and stuff. And a guy named Robert Filio had become county commissioner. And he lived here in Crestone. And he was a real estate guy. He owned the real estate office as you came into town, where Benji and Michelle started their little business with teas and things, and then expanded into where they are now. Anyway, so Robert was a commissioner then. And so I kind of got to know him a little bit, and they were setting up a separate planning commission for this area instead of using the planning commission in Saguache County. And it was called the Sub-Area Planning Commission. And anyway, so the town wanted me to take over to be their representative on that. So I did that. You know, it was amazing all the stuff that went on. You know, at one point, it was quite unanimous on the board that we had that they didn't want the town to become the commercial area for the Baca. They wanted the Baca to develop their own commercial area. That's where it started, you know, and this would have been back in about 96 or something like that, 97. I'm not sure how long it took them to get that. I would come back and report, you know, to the town board on these meetings and stuff. And all of a sudden, some of the people that owned commercial property said, wait a minute, we do want to be able to develop our property, want it to be worth more, you know, and stuff. And of course, most of the residents in the Baca, they didn't want commercial businesses next to where they were, and that's where it would have had to been. And so there was this area designated as for, you know, commercial things by the POA, which is out there where Steve built that, started his gas station building out of cinder blocks and cement out there. And then he abandoned it, decided not to do it. So it's never developed out there, and the town decided to do that. But I mean, it went, you know, it just turned to 90 degrees, went the total opposite way, from one meeting to the next. And I was pretty much following the will of the board and just doing what they asked me to do and taking that back, you know, to the planning commission and doing that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And so then I saw what was going on by the county commissioners and how often it was that whenever a planning commission made a recommendation, they were going to do whatever they wanted anyway. You know, the state has rules where you had to have planning commissions, and certain things have to go through them and stuff. The city has those too. It's like the difficulty with our present zoning, getting that done. It's hard to get people to come and do that, you know, in their spare time and stuff. So, and besides that, the board always just does what they want anyway. Yeah.
So you ran for county commissioner?
Yeah, I first ran for county commissioner in 2000 because the group that was in there and that was representing us did not oppose AWDI. They were going along with AWDI to ship the water out of the valley. And so they wanted a candidate who was opposed to that. And I've been, you know, active in that since the beginning. I mean, in the early 90s when I was living over near Valley View, I remember Christina and I started, you know, that's when I first met and talked with Chris Canale. And so, you know, and she was always just a big environmentalist and stuff. So that's how I got into that. And then I wasn't going to run again. I really didn't enjoy campaigning that much. I mean, you learned a lot because the way you campaign in this county is you got to go around knocking on everybody's doors and talking to them. So I met a lot more of the old timers and got to know them a little bit and how they felt about things, you know, not just in the town, but all around the valley and stuff, and got a sense. You know, I've always basically been kind of a libertarian. I like to keep government out of our lives as much as possible. So that's kind of where my political views came from. I was always a registered Democrat just because the Democrats help the poor people more than the Republicans. That's just always been true, you know, so.
Do you have any ideas about how you'd like to see town grow?
Well, you know, one of the interesting things that, I mean, and one of the things we did while I was on the board was get in the sewage system. Some people don't remember, but we used to have a big sewer lagoon. I can't remember if that was still here when you came into town. I think maybe it was. Mm-hmm. And we had a real hard time getting rid of that. We had to bring in the state health department and stuff. And the state health department came down. I think maybe there might have been someone from DOLA there. Anyway, they came down with all this money, and we partnered with Baca Water and Sand because Baca Water and Sand couldn't apply for grants to upgrade their sewage treatment plant without the town being involved. So by the town being involved and agreeing to put their, have the Baca treat their sewage and stuff, we did that. It was also the same time that we passed our first sales tax increase, which got the tax up to 3%. And, the reason we did that, and it was discussed at the meeting too, was because we knew we'd need the money to support the sewage system eventually. There was a $60,000 loan we had to pay back and all this stuff. The money, it wasn't that long after that I became a county commissioner, and I'd been involved in a lot of things. The hospice people helped me a lot when Sally Ann passed, and pretty soon after that they asked me to be on the San Luis Valley Hospice Board, and I was president of that for a couple of years, or chairman, whatever it was, and so I had credentials that people like to look at when you're sending out little campaign flyers and stuff like that, I also had bad opponents. I think that's how I got elected both times. So, the other choice was even worse than Sam, And an awful lot of people around here do agree with a kind of libertarian focus to keep government out of their lives as much as possible. So.
But what about town growing?
Well, the town growing is, it's just happened, and it's good. I think it could still use another between the Baca and the town, and most of the development has always been in the Baca subdivision. I think it could really use another 500 to 1,000 people to really have a good job base that would sustain itself for, many, many, many years. And maybe it's already done that because there are, a lot of people come here. There's a lot of spiritual centers. People fall in love with it. There's still plenty of property for sale. They buy and they build.
What role would you like to see the POA play in that development?
Well, the POA is, ever since I've been here, there's been this juxtaposition between a certain amount of people who have their property values first and foremost, and that's what makes them determine whatever rules and regulations that they try and enforce and pass through the Property Owners Association. And there's always been the other people who just live here and sometimes are renters and are generally poorer, and they're less concerned about property values than they are about human values and making life work for all the people that live here as best as possible. That's always been my goal rather than property values. I mean, when I first came up here I was probably 89 or 90 and looked at property to buy, I was with this girl I was dating at the time named Christina. And we decided not to because we read the covenants and she wanted to have a teepee up all the time for doing her ceremonies and stuff that she was into. And so, we didn't do it. I mean, I really wanted to buy that property that Robin ended up with.
Earthnack?
Huh?
Earthnack?
Yeah, right out there where the creek runs down. That's beautiful. I mean, it was for sale. They wanted $5,000 for it.
Yeah. Pretty sure she put a teepee up.
When I came back and started driving around out there again a few years later, and then you had they used to call the three little pigs that were building their straw bales out there, Keith and, anyway, there were three of them going up there at that point. Peter and Keith, and then another guy who sold his place and moved on. They were all building straw bales. They were just right on the main road with junk piled everywhere. And I just shaking my head and said, this is not going to fly. Because I knew at the time that people were really pushing their luck with what the covenants said and stuff. So,
What advice do you have for newcomers?
well, I think you should, you know, to me, when I first came up here, I knew I had enough money to get a lot. And I had enough know-how and materials and stuff laying around that I knew I'd be able to build a house. So for me, the first thing was getting water and sewer and getting a bathroom in. Once you do those things, you know, the complaint factor from neighbors goes way down because they know you're taking care of your shit, you know, and that's what, you know, you need to do. Unfortunately, you know, a lot of things have changed and it's gotten a lot more expensive now. I mean, it's amazing what the water and sand has been allowed to do in terms of just absolving old, you know, tap fees and demanding that you pay new ones and all kinds of things. But the state has given these special districts like that, because that's what they are, it's a special district, water and sanitation district, a lot of powers so that they can financially function. And if the boards, you know, you get different boards in there that do different things. So, you know, I mean, to me, that's the main thing. Just build your bathroom first.
Deal with your shit.
Yeah, you know, and then you'll just be amazed how much of the opposition just fades away. You know, you're still going to have to do things. You know, I remember Buddy telling me, I don't know if you know Buddy Frank, but this guy that built out in the Grants, he just paid $200 fine every year just to keep him off his back because he didn't want to build over the 300 or 400 square foot little place that he built. You know, and I think eventually he just did. You know, but it wasn't. You know, it was. They've had this juxtaposition between E&AC committee and the POA and their powers and builders going on for as long as I've been here. So it's, you know, sometimes you get boards that are friendlier and easier to get along with. I can remember when Jerry, who died, and Mark and Bill were all on the board together, and things were pretty loose, you know. You could do stuff, you know. And it looks like my time's about up, so.
I'm going to ask you another question. Is there anything else that comes to mind that you want to share or want people to remember?
I think Crestone has a good future. I think that the fact that it's, you know, probably the major area of people who are into exploring Eastern religions, you know, it's where they come, it's where they get drawn to. And with all the spiritual centers that have sprouted up, I think that there'll always be, you know, the dynamic that is going on now. And I would say the job of the town board, the POA and the ENAC is, my opinion would be to just try and do the dance and between property values and human values and do the best job you can according to your beliefs. That's all. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
We talked to us for just a second about waiving and if there's anything missing from the community today that you treasured in the 90s.
Well, it used to be when I would drive up to Crestone, especially in the late 80s and even in the early 90s, people had gotten in the habit of waving to each other when they passed because they knew each other. And you didn't see another car on the road that often then. You know, now you see them all the time. And, you know, a lot of the people still wave and stuff like that. You know, I just, you know, nod, or if somebody waves to me, I you know, acknowledge it, but that's about it. Yeah.
Do you miss that?
I think everybody misses the back when I first moved here in the first 5 years or so, at least, there was more of a community spirit, I felt. And people really worked together to, there was a whole lot of people that were up here that were poor, that were building out of whatever they could find and just doing it and stuff like that. And I enjoyed that a lot. And the community dances were great. And there was just, I think there was more of that. And I think right now it's gone the other way with the present POA board and the NAC committee and what they're trying to, some of the hoops they're trying to make people jump through. I don't think they'd pass muster in a court of law if somebody, but most of the people wouldn't ever want to take it that far. Mm-hmm. So I've always liked the idea that that there's still places around the country that a person that only has a little bit of money can go and build and do his own thing. I just think that's
why I came.
Yeah, it's very basic to a lot of human spirit. So I think it's good. Yeah.
And you got any questions that come to mind?
I want to ask this just about politics. Christian Kizen had the funniest comment. He's like, when you get here, you should just be quiet for 5 years. See how things are. Don't get into politics.
Yeah.
Would you have anything to comment around people getting engaged when they come here, or how to be engaged when they come here?
I think certain people are more inclined to get involved. I had never been involved in politics in my life until I was able to walk down to the little building, do it. And I knew they were making decisions that affected, my building project, how I lived, those kind of things. I think that's, when the POA or somebody passes things that interfere with people's lives and what they're doing, and everybody gets upset and they go to the meetings for a little while and try and, complain, get something done. So as far as waiting 5 years, I think, sure, I 5 years later, and especially after I ran for county commissioner in 2000, where I really learned a lot about the rest of the valley. I knocked on all the doors in Saguache and Center and all the farmhouses. I mean, I really hit just about every building in town. I mean, I went up to sergeants. I went everywhere, So it was, certainly I knew better then about what to do, but I think that most people appreciated the fact I didn't lie to people, try to pretend I was anything I wasn't. I think generally in rural areas, people want the government out of their lives as much as possible. And this is a little bit of a mix of urban and rural here. The town's definitely a little more urban, the Baca's a little more urban, but still, you've got animals, wild animals that just roam through everywhere. So it's pretty rural in my opinion. And I always tried to err on the side of favoring that type of lifestyle and those type of values. Yeah. So I really don't think it helps. I think that certain people are going to get involved whether they've waited 5 years or not. I think certainly you're going to have a better feel for things and stuff. But certain types just want to be the bosses and tell others what to do. I never wanted to do that. And I think I'm a rare person in politics, because I think you've got to be the antithesis of a bully. You don't want to force people to live like you or anything. You want to give them whatever leeway you can. So.